April 2nd, 1865. Here in this field, this is the place where the beginning of the end actually starts, right here on the outskirts of Petersburg, across this open field on land preserved forever by the American Battlefield Trust. This is where the breakthrough in Petersburg really starts. Today we're going to take you out here across this field. We're going to show you some spots that you can only get to by walking. There's no way for you to get there and park or take a car or drive to the location or even ride a bicycle. This is the place that you want to be if you are a true Civil War nerd and want to see where the beginning of the end happened, right here in Petersburg, across these fields, saved by the Battlefield Trust. So come along, we'll take you on that trip. Now, first thing you notice when you walk inside this fort is just exactly how massive these walls are as you come from the bridge there from the parking lot. Now, inside Fort Fisher, there's some clear paths for you to take to go along these walls and to see the different things that are inside here. Sometimes during the summertime, they allow the grass and the vegetation to grow up on these banks, and it helps to protect those hills to keep them from falling apart. The more roots that are in the ground, the sturdier they are. But out here today, it looks like they've been out here clearing this area out not too long ago. And so the path is real clear, and the structures that are on the inside, like these structures you can see here underneath that bridge, are very clear to the naked eye. We're going to continue to walk around here inside Fort Fisher for a minute and let you see a little bit more of what's inside here. And then and hopefully my dog and her loud breathing doesn't make too much noise here in this video. And check that out. That's pretty cool. So I'm going to go up to the top of this and see what we can see from up here. This is pretty neat. Wow, that's pretty cool. I'm going to back out just a little bit. So from up here, you can kind of see from the very top, like there's a gun emplacement over there. And then the outer walls here. Structures are very well defined here at Fort Fisher. This is pretty neat to see. Coincidentally, if you try to take your GPS out to Fort Fisher, it will dump you off in another location. And you will be at the wrong fort. So do not trust that. What you're looking for is stop number 3 on the western front stops of the Petersburg National Military Park map. Check that out over there. That's real neat. Well, that's some pretty cool stuff from up there. I'm gonna make my way around this fort and back out, and I'm gonna head across the street and go out there to that Civil War Trust land where the other locations are. Now, if you go out there, make sure that you are paying attention to what you're doing. It is some pretty wild-cut land out there. There are some critters that are roaming around, and during the summertime, it gets extremely hot across that field. There's no place for you to get water, and really no way out unless you're tracking back out of there. You can get confused if you're not used to hiking out on places like this. So be safe, be prepared. Bring plenty of water during the summertime. So as I'm going along in the fort here, they have a couple of places where you can walk where you're very surrounded by the walls of this fortification. And then of course, wooden platforms like that right there behind me for you to climb up on and kind of look out and get a good view. Now just over my shoulder here is the main road that takes you into where this fortification is. This is really neat stuff. Whole lot of flags sticking up out of the ground. Wonder what that identifies. Now the sign that's right out in front of the fort calls it the largest fort. And it talks about that April 2nd, right there on the sign itself. The fall of Petersburg and the solitary shot that signaled the open final Union assault here on the city. It also talks about this signal tower at People's Farm, which is a quarter-mile behind us. It's now a cemetery where that tower was. But this map here gives you a real good view of some of the things we've been talking about recently. For example, Chamberlain and his wounding and his nearly dying during Petersburg at the Second Battle of Petersburg. If you look at that map, you can see the Bermuda Hundred here on the map and how the Union soldiers actually came across the James River and attacked from this direction, swinging down and slowly moving the Confederates back into the little trap that they were in right there. Now, at the very beginning of this, they had outer works that were out here that the Confederate soldiers were actually using to support this town and city. But the more that the Union soldiers attacked, the more the Confederates had to back out and get around Petersburg to protect it and save themselves from being assaulted in the way that they were being assaulted. Had the Union soldiers attacked them in June of 1864 with their full forces, when there was only 2,200 men out here, they may have very well taken Petersburg and cut the Confederacy up here at Richmond completely off from any of the rail systems. You can see the railroads coming in and out of Petersburg here, and you can also trace those same railroads going up through here into Richmond. It's pretty amazing what could have happened if only they had attacked this properly here. But they failed almost 3-4 days in a row to properly attack Petersburg in order to secure this town and those railroads. Now, that's not to say Robert E. Lee and his forces up here, they find out what's happening down here and they bail. Maybe they go out west. Maybe they head back north, feign an attack on Washington, D.C. And then this never materializes as a siege. But what could happen is Richmond's taken right away. And that was never the goal, really, for General Grant. He was always looking to take the Army of Northern Virginia. Now I'm headed across the street here, and right behind me is a sign that talks about this being American Battlefield Trust land now, preserved forever. There's also a monument that dedicated the 427 acres to being saved for all time. It's pretty neat to see that. I guess you could technically park over here, but it's been so wet lately that I wouldn't attempt to put my car out here unless it has four-wheel drive, obviously. But yeah, here we are. Petersburg Battlefield's trail parking, no vehicles beyond this point. Well, it's marking the Civil War Trust. So that's a fairly old sign right here. Check that out. Well, we're going to get out there on the trail and show you what's beyond. So out here on this trail, the very first thing you see is this sign here talking about the fight and the campaign that happened starting on March 25th with the Battle of Jones Farm, which basically set the stage for the breakthrough that happened out here across this field towards Pamplin State Park. There is a trail map that guides you all the way into Pamplin, and of course Pamplin has a fee when you get there. The fight that took place across these open fields, which we're about to go to in a second, it's pretty massive. We're talking 14,000 Union soldiers crossing over from these fields, dead ahead, out of their works, in that direction, towards the Confederate lines, where basically just barely over 2,000 soldiers, about 2,800, 2,700 soldiers, were sitting in those lines over there, protecting their area, and they were slammed right into. That breakthrough, which led to multiple Medal of Honor winners, or awardees, and also led to several lines of men being butchered across the way, would eventually break Robert E. Lee. And as a result, they would have to evacuate Petersburg and evacuate Richmond. And you know what happens after that. Straight on the Appomattox and the surrender. So we're going to make our way out here in this trail and see if we can't find our way across to Pamplin State Historic Park. Can you imagine owning all of this property out here for generations, not really doing much with it, maybe hunting on it or something like that, and then eventually it's either purchased or gifted to the trust? It's amazing that this place survived in the condition that it survived in, and that the fortifications that are out there that we're about to go see are in the condition that they're in. As you can tell, there's some pretty sketchy places around here. Right now, this trail, as I'm crossing over one of these trees, is it looks cleared, but there are some areas out here that probably could use some work, and some older trees that probably need to be cut down so they don't fall on people. But we're going to continue going down this path and make our way over to that first fort or redoubt that's out here, and then see the beautiful open field that's right across the way from that actual place that we parked at. Well, I'm making my way out here through this trail now. I did notice that there is a pole back there with an arrow on it that points you in the right direction to continue on the path. The path is pretty well cleared too. During the summertime, I'm sure it's probably not as easy to see the path, but right now it's real neat. Now I'm about to come out into this clear open view in front of me, and we're going to pan around so you can see what all is out there in front of us. Oh, look at that. I think I see a beaver up there on top of that earthwork. Let's flip this around. All right, here we are out into the open. This is pretty amazing stuff here. Looks like there's a trail that goes down through there, probably to somebody's private property. But here is that first stop. Now, if you want to get a real feel for what it's like being in the fortifications during the battle or the siege around Petersburg, this is it. This is probably as close as it's going to get. This big swath and open field is going to give you that perspective, because as you can tell, there's nothing around here except for these earthworks. And what's even better, You make your way up to the edge of these earthworks over here and out to where you can look out across the earthworks, and all you see is open field. This is similar to the view that they would have in those days. They're behind these earthworks, tucked away, protected. And I'm sure that there were plenty of huts and things like that that were built out here for them to stay warm in during the winter and to get out of the weather. But besides that, and besides the fact that these earthworks would have been a whole lot taller than they are today, this open view towards the enemy, this is about as original as it gets. Man, this is something else. And I'm telling you, you can't beat that. This place is magnificent. And we're going to continue along here on this trail and take it all the way across, just shy of going into Pamplin Park. Because I want to do something separate on Pamplin. And the Battlefield Trust is heavily involved with Pamplin now. So we're going to talk about that in another video here in the near future. Out here on this field, there are multiple signs that kind of tell the story about the battles and the fights that happen around here. And also, there's lots of good quotes on it from soldiers. If you can deal with a bunch of flies flying around your head. But this particular sign I'm looking at right now talks about the Union lines. And it says that the Army had extended their fortifications in 1864, including the classic examples that are here in front of us right now. In addition, there were obstructions placed in front of the main earthworks and the Civil War version of barbed wire described by Corporal Burwell. So Burwell, who was with the 5th Wisconsin Infantry, says, "We have set what we call Johnny catchers, long poles set into the ground with the upper end about as high as a man's head, and they are so thick that a rabbit could not crawl through." That's how he describes those Johnny catchers or Johnny Reb catchers. John B. Gordon says, "The breastworks behind which stood the brave army in blue appeared to be as impenetrable by any force which Lee could send against them, as is modern ironclad to the missiles from the ordinary field battery." That's his excellent interpretation of what these earthworks look like out here. And there's a lot of good pictures here on this sign to kind of give you that historical perspective, looking back into the past and what once existed out here. And today, you can actually come out here and put your hands on these earthworks and actually feel a part of history that's still standing today, all those years after the war. It's pretty amazing stuff. One thing to note, the stretch that we're walking out here is Fort Welch, and then I believe Battery 26 is what they said was also out here, and then infantry lines or infantry breastworks are out here. And you can take the trail or the pathway from left to right and then walk straight across that field. So we're going to continue along, check out the rest of the signs and the rest of these earthworks. As you can see them running right along here, just right behind me across this field. If you've never been out here before and seen this stuff, and you're a Civil War nerd, you're missing out. You got to come check this stuff out. This is pretty amazing out here. All right, looks like I'm coming up on my next stop here. Pretty sure this is Welch. I'm gonna get inside here and see what they have for interpretive signs. Take you right along with me. They have this nice bridge that goes across the moat. Keeps your feet nice and dry. And check this out down below here. That's pretty wet, pretty wet. And then of course, you need to keep your eyes open for any wooden planks that you're walking on out here, because there's no telling when the last time they were replaced was. As you can see down here in this section, there is a portion of it that is kind of rotted out over the years of it sitting out here. But we're going to go up here to this display. They have a nice plank area up there with a sign, and we can look out even further across this field. So here we go. Here we go. Man, check this out. You know, a man could get happy living out in a place like this. Middle of nowhere. You can hear the traffic off in the distance, but just all this land. This is a beautiful place. And it's kind of hard to imagine 14,000 soldiers making their way across this field towards Pamplin, which is right there behind those woods, on a massive fight that broke the Confederate lines on April 2nd of 1865. So here's the Civil War Trails and Civil War Trust sign, which is really old. It's nice how they kind of built this platform right up against it here so you can see everything out in front of us. Here it talks about the main Confederate line, 1 mile, People's Farm, Union Advance, October 2nd, 1864. So, taking a look at that, I'm going to go ahead and guess that that's somewhere in this direction here. Then it says the South Side Railroad is 3 miles in that direction over there. Boyden Plank Road, off in that direction over there. Main Confederate lines, somewhere out in here. Richmond, due north, 25 miles. And then Petersburg, 5 miles off in this direction over here. It also gives you a timeline of stuff. The Battle of Jones Farm, the Breakthrough, and the Battle of Peebles Farm, the Union Advance. So that's pretty neat. And of course, walking around inside here is the bonus to all of this. You can walk all the way through this planked area and check out these works that still exist today and probably haven't been visited by very many people, which is why they're in such great shape. Beware of the thorny plants. Can you beat this stuff? I mean, I don't think you can. But being out here and seeing this place and seeing everything, it's just pretty magnificent. So here we are out front of Welch itself, out front of these earthworks that we went through. They're part of the National Military Park, but also part of the land that the American Battlefield Trust saved out here on this battlefield. And it talks about how dangerous life between the picket lines could be, but also how mundane it was out here, and how soldiers were constantly skirting the rules and actually interacting with each other out here and possibly trading with each other. There's a couple of quotes out here, one from Corporal Lewis Bissell of the 2nd Connecticut Heavy Artillery, and he says, "When a man is on picket at night, he is monarch of all he surveys. No one living has more absolute power than he. His word is law." And from the 12th Virginia Infantry, Sergeant James E. Whitehorn says, "I have seen veterans of 3 full years who have faced death incessantly, who believe in the Southern cause as sincerely as I do, finally be conquered by gnawing hunger and desert to the enemy. I hate the idea, but I won't criticize." Here we are near the end of this war. This is the kind of stuff these guys are facing on a regular basis. The Confederates are being starved out here in Petersburg with very few provisions being shipped in and trucked in through these roads that are being tightened around them every single day. And this sign here also talks about how during the winter of 64 and 65 that the temperatures were constantly thawing and refreezing the roads, which made the roads impassable. So if you weren't having things transferred back and forth via train or boat, chances are you're getting stuck in the mud. Directly out in front of me here is another sign going across the paths here in this beautiful open field. Now, just a minute ago, we were way back over here at that fort, the outlying wall. And right about there is where I saw the idiot who was allowing their dog to dig into the earthworks. You can actually see the giant patch of dirt on the outside of that earthwork. Zoom in here real close. Right there, where they allowed that animal to dig into that earthwork. It's absolutely astounding. All right, back to history. Let's get over here to these signs here and read what we have to read. Now, generally speaking, when I go to an open field like this and I see an outcropping of trees that are fairly large in an open field and everything else around it is tilled up and made for planting, then this indicates to me that at one point in time some sort of structure was probably here on this land. So we're going to read this sign and see what information it has to give us, and hopefully it'll give us some information about that. But if not, it's still cool. So the sign is placed here in front of me. It talks about something we've already covered, which was the Dinwiddie Courthouse assault. We have that video on our channel if you want to check it out and see what that place looks like. It also talks about the 6th Corps, who was actually here and attacked across this field directly behind me. They're going across this field towards that location that I said earlier, Pamplin State Historic Park, which is basically the lines over there where the breakthrough took place. Grant sensed that Lee, after April 1st, really March 29th into April 1st, that Lee was at a breaking point. And he felt like if he pressed this issue enough, that he was going to get those lines to break and he could at least separate the army. He did not, I don't think he really calculated as big of success as there was here, because this was a huge success. In order to get Lee out of those lines, but also to get him on the run and evacuating Richmond and Petersburg, that's a pretty big deal. But out here at this location, you can still see beautiful long lines of earthworks out there. You can see wide open fields, and you can see the original lines where we were just at over here. It's a pretty amazing spot to be. And during the summertime, this is the only respite you have right here on this field, because everything else is right out into the sunlight. So we're going to push on down there. I see one more sign just around the way, and see how much more there is to see out here on these lines. So the sign in front of me says 6th Corps poised for attack, April 2nd, 1865. And Colonel James Hubbard of the 2nd Connecticut Heavy Artillery tells his men, "Gentlemen, we're going to have a hell of a fight at early daylight. If any of you have anything to say to your folks, wives, or sweethearts, make your story short and get what sleep you can." This is what they're facing here, and they know it. The 2,800 men that are behind those earthworks over there that they're going to attack, they're not exactly rookies. They are seasoned veterans out here, and they've been surviving and scraping to get by in these Confederate lines. And they have had to defend themselves and defend those lines for months out here. So they know how to do it. But the onslaught, the bomb rush of 14,000 soldiers that are about to come towards them is really what creates this break. Now, one of the most amazing things that happens during the American Civil War here, at least with the Army of Northern Virginia, happens just right over there. There is a crossroads where there is a, you can pull off, there's an old house there, and there's a Civil War trail sign. And it tells of the men attacking those lines over there and actually hearing Confederate soldiers behind the lines argue and fight with each other on whether or not they should just surrender, because they knew the end was near and they felt like they were throwing their lives away for nothing. They could hear them say that stuff. It was very audible. It was loud. Louder than the combat happening around them. No doubt out here at Pamplin, there was probably some of the same conversations happening with some of those young soldiers over there defending those earthworks. All right, so again, utilizing our signage out here, thanks to the American Battlefield Trust. Also, make sure you visit battlefields.org and check out what they got going on. But using the signage, it says you are here. That is where we are located, facing in that direction. This is all of the units that are going to be fighting in this field, heading towards that park we were talking about. Heth, A.P. Hill, Wilcox, the 45th Georgia, 33rd North Carolina, 18th North Carolina, 37th North Carolina, 28th North Carolina, across the field there. And then over here for the Union side, well, you can take a look at how many different units are fighting across this field going towards that state park. That is a pretty amazing amount of men from different parts of the North fighting against these men. And coincidentally, one of the units behind these lines was actually responsible for General Jackson's wounding, accidental wounding, just north of here, when he ended up dying as a result of an infection in his lungs after the wounding. Now, making our way along here on this trail, it's very clear to see that there are many of these little signs, these little posts out here that tell you exactly where to go. And this is pretty neat, seeing the swampy runoff out here across this field. Whoa, there we go, turkey. Very cool. You see that turkey? Yeah. All right, so out here in these woods, there is a nice swampy bottom area over here that's doing a little runoff, if you will. And then you head straight on down the path, and there's another post over here that tells you to take another direction. So we're going to keep moving along here until we start to run out of signs, and then ultimately head back. Like I said, we're going to take Pamplin from the other direction, and we're going to do a small video about the works that are out there. But this is a beautiful place, no matter where you walk out here. It's just very serene and scenic. It's amazing that not too many people come out here to see this. And these signs, a lot of them are pretty old, been put in place a long time ago. And the Battlefield Trust Organization and Civil War Trails, they replace them as often as they can, especially when they have good sponsors for those signs. On March 25th of 1865, the Battle of Jones Farms takes place out here at this location. Most people know that as Lee's last offensive, which happens at Fort Stedman. The earthworks that are placed just behind me here, and you can kind of see them running right off in that direction there, kind of a dip in the ground. That was Confederate earthworks at that time. But the Union soldiers took those earthworks and eventually reversed them and turned them into earthworks for Union soldiers. Well, when the offensive happened on April 2nd that broke Lee's lines, they actually took these earthworks and used them as part of their advance when they came across this field and sent 14,000 soldiers towards the Confederates on the other side of these woods here. Now, as I walk along here, I can clearly see those Confederate earthworks out here in these woods, passing through this trail. It's really neat to see this. And it's not really a rough trail to get around on either. It's pretty simple. But unfortunately for these earthworks, there's some critters that are calling it home. You can see how they're digging holes in there where the gun emplacements used to be. So I climbed out here to the middle of this field, just across the way from that stop that we were at, where I said there could have been potentially some sort of structure back there in between those trees. And I wanted to do that so that we could get a fresh perspective of what this whole field looks like. You can see I'm on the high point. The earthworks are back here. And all around me here, this is the entire wide open space where all those soldiers are, the Union soldiers that are preparing for battle. They're actually forming up in this area out here. They're getting ready from that direction there. They've also got earthworks that they've captured over here from a previous battle. So they're in place, they're headed in that direction. And this is a unique perspective that you cannot get at hardly any other battlefield. The only other place I can think that's kind of like this is possibly the Mule Shoe Salient, but even that field is really small at Spotsylvania. And some places out there in Antietam, there's some real good personal moments you can have out there on those fields. But here at this location in Petersburg, there's no other battlefield like this. This is a really great place. So I've come to the part in the field where we have our sign, our wooden sign back here, a little crude written sign that points away to the battlefield trail system for Petersburg and the exit to go back to the parking lot out here. So we're gonna make our way back out across this field, right across to Fort Welch and back to Fort Fisher where the car is parked. It's been a beautiful day out here, even though it's been cloudy most of the way and kind of warm. I highly encourage you, if you're in the Petersburg area and you're looking for a good experience, a good Civil War experience, to check out historic earthworks and kind of daydream, if you will, as to what it would have been like. Come out here to this section of land that's been preserved by the Battlefield Trust and check out what they do. This is what they do. They save this land and try to preserve as much as possible for future generations to enjoy it and to learn about what these men did on these fields and what the civilians and citizens did in support of it. So sometimes when you come out to these fields, you run into things you don't expect. And here is a cemetery plot for the Pegram family. Civil War nerds know that name very well. Edward Oscar Pegram, born September 17th, it looks like 1830, died May 21st of 1889. His wife Octavia Boisseau, born September 30th, 1842, died August 25th of 1907. That is real neat to run into a family plot out here across this open field with such a historic name. So we're out here today across from Fort Fisher at some Battlefield Trust land that was preserved around Fort Welch, across the open fields where the final assault came from that broke through the Confederate lines here on April 2nd of 1865. And as I was out here, I noticed an individual who was older on top of these earthworks, and they had their animal out here digging in earthworks, probably chasing some sort of animal or something, but nonetheless, just digging the heck out of it. And they're just standing there having a grand old time. And of course, I holler at them saying, "Hey, your animal's digging a hole in those earthworks." And the lady looks down and goes, "Oh, thanks," and then continues to stand there with her two animals on top of these earthworks, and until I kindly reminded her, "Hey, that's not something you should be doing." Sometimes younger people can teach older people things. Maybe she didn't know, maybe she couldn't read the 20 or so signs on the way in the park that says don't stand on these earthworks. I'm not too judgy about that, but I will say this: if you see a situation like that, say something, because too many animals digging in these earthworks will cause them to fall apart, and eventually they will collapse, and we will no longer have these beautifully preserved pieces of land that stand as a memorial to the soldiers that fought and died across these fields to preserve the country that they lived in and to make it possible for you to live in this same country and learn about the history across these fields. So have respect for those men that fought here. Stay off their earthworks. It has been outstanding and absolutely amazing to be out here in these fields in Petersburg, around Fort Welch, Fort Fisher, and the open swath of land between here and Pamplin. I can't say how refreshing it is to come out here on a day like today and check out this place and to see how these earthworks still stand proud and strong, as if they're here to continue to support and protect the soldiers that are behind it. It's amazing, and I'm awfully glad that the American Battlefield Trust was able to preserve land like this. Now, if you go over to their website, you're going to see that they are continuing to work on areas around Virginia, such as Gaines Mill, to preserve more land. I highly encourage you to check out their website and to check out their page on X to see what's going on with that organization. And if you have the opportunity to pitch in somehow, some way, whether it be with money or time, go ahead and make that happen. It's well worth it to be a part of that organization and to ensure that places like these still stand for all time. Well, until next time, we'll see you out there on the road. Oh, by the way, April 1st is coming up here pretty quick. So that week, that first week in April, in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, the Gettysburg Film Festival is happening. We'll be up there. We hope to see you up there too and join us at the film festival. Until we see you then, this is History with Waffles. We'll see you out there. Sure is beautiful out here.